In a luxurious villa, a bizarre homicide takes place. Eamon died in his bathtub, with a blow to the head that didn't even give him a chance to resist. The only wife who was at home became the prime suspect, but the doctor's diagnosis showed that he was unconscious at the time of the crime, completely unaware. What's even more bizarre is that no strangers were found in the surveillance video, but the murder weapon disappeared inexplicably. Who exactly orchestrated this case? What kind of conspiracy is hidden behind the murder? Hello everyone, welcome to my movie commentary channel. Today I bring you an unpopular high-scoring crime film final analysis. The main character, of the words, quietest magicians, is a psychiatrist. That morning, a patient named Diana came to his clinic. Lately she has been dreaming that she is sorting out flowers. There are 3 types of flowers: lilies, carnations, and roses. There is also a flower whose name I can't remember. Not only that she's always late for whatever she does, and seems to be deliberately avoiding something. Many patients' trained thoughts often stem from the influence of their family of origin, but Diana could not say why. Her parents died when she was very young, and she might have known better if she could have called her sister.
She says she knows some things.
That evening, Diana's sister Heather came to visit. The incredibly beautiful Heather instantly attracted Barr's attention, and he forgot the purpose of Heather's visit for a while. Thereafter, Barr often approached Heather on the grounds of discussing his condition. How could the clever Heather fail to see this? So she took the initiative to talk about one thing: she has been married for 3 years, but her relationship with her husband is not good, and the two are more like strangers living under the same roof. Barr wondered, in that case, why didn't he get a divorce? Heather smiled awkwardly. She couldn't imagine the consequences of divorcing an underworld. Intuition tells Barr that he can't be with this woman, not only because she's married, but because she's his patient's sister. But when it came to actually confronting Heather, all moral codes were left behind. That night, the two were together. Taking this opportunity, Heather told her sister what had happened to her. It turned out that my sister had been violated by her father when she was a child, and later a fire broke out in the house, and my father was also killed in the fire. Originally thought that this matter would pass like this, but I didn't expect my sister's psychology to be estranged, and even gradually developed into a pathology. As long as the cause is found, things are much easier. Barr promised to cure Diana. The scene turns, and Heather returns home. Her husband had made it too late for her to be home by 11 o'clock in the evening, and he wanted to know where Heather had gone. Although her husband had a smile on his face, Heather was too frightened to come out. One can imagine how afraid she is of him on weekdays. The husband did not continue to ask, and asked her to take off her clothes. Although Heather was extremely reluctant, she did not dare to disobey her husband's orders. The next day, Diana continued to come back for follow-up appointments. She dreamed again last night that she was arranging flowers. In addition to lilies and carnations, the third flower is violets. But no one knows what these flowers represent. In the evening, Heather and her husband go to a restaurant for dinner, and the two have little in common. Heather was on pins and needles here, and she took a sip of the red wine, and then felt dizzy and nauseous. Her husband asked her to go to the bathroom to sober up, but she didn't expect that as soon as she went up the stairs, she began to lose control of her emotions. She said things that everyone couldn't understand, and even threw her husband to the ground like crazy. Her husband rushed her to the hospital. Upon diagnosis, Heather was suffering from pathological drunkenness. There are usually no obvious symptoms of this condition, but as long as a small amount of alcohol is consumed, it can cause emotional agitation and even violent behavior. Heather was hospitalized last year for this problem, but this time she drank less, so her husband didn't pay much attention to it. Fortunately, no special treatment is required for this disease, and the symptoms disappear when the alcohol dissipates. The next day, Barr takes Heather to an abandoned water tower. It was the first time in 2 years that Barr did not show up for work. He had been dealing with patients all the time, and his day-to-day life had already numbed him, until the appearance of Heather gave him a new feeling. While the two were chatting, the fence of the water tower suddenly shook due to disrepair, and they hurriedly retreated into the water tower. During the descent from the stairs, Heather's handbag accidentally dropped, and a heavy copper pipe rolled out of it. Barr wonders, at Eastwood, just how could a woman have a copper pipe in her bag? Heather explained that this was for self-defense, and that there had been too many madmen lately. That night, a colleague was asked by Barr to find out the details of Heather's husband. She launders money, cheats, and does everything. Hooking up with his wife is simply playing with fire. His instincts tell Barr that he can't see this woman again, but Barr isn't sure if he'll be able to. So that night, Barr went to a bar and saw her husband taking Heather to chat with his friends. When he saw Barr, he immediately became nervous. Although the two didn't say a word, the sensitive husband noticed something unusual. At first, she thought she was being targeted by the police, so she followed Barr to the bathroom to confirm the situation. Barr didn't hide it either, and told her the truth frankly. This undoubtedly made her relationship with Heather public. Because he was talking about business, the husband could not have a seizure on the spot, and only warned Barr to stay away from his wife. Heather then left the bar under the pretext of being unwell, went to the pharmacy to get some medicine accompanied by Barr, and went home. As everyone knows, but just one knows, her husband has been waiting at home for a long time. Heather left before she did, only to return later. Although she had an excuse to go to the pharmacy, her husband didn't believe it at all and asked her to take off her clothes as punishment as usual. Day after day of torture brought Heather to the brink of collapse. In a trance, she picked up a dumbbell and slammed it at her husband's head. Once, twice, 3 times, until he collapsed in the bathtub and didn't move at all. The next day, Barr was notified and hurried to the detention center. Although Heather was anxious to get rid of her husband, she would never resort to this way. She wondered what had happened to her last night. Heather said that she just chatted with her husband normally last night, and she didn't know why it suddenly got out of control, and she couldn't remember anything about what happened next. But she didn't drink at all last night. How could she suddenly get out of control? Barr asked her to think carefully about what she had taken when she got home. Yesterday she had been coughing, so she drank some cough medicine. Barr immediately saw the problem. Cough medicine unusually contains 2% alcohol, and it must have been this drug that triggered her pathological symptoms of drunkenness. Later, the pawn stages, Barr brought in a lawyer friend, and Heather's diagnosis records at various hospitals could attest to her condition. Committing a crime in an unconscious state can reduce or exempt criminal responsibility. To determine whether there was a motive for the crime, the lawyer asked about Heather's husband's estate and insurance. Heather said that her husband had long been bankrupt due to gambling, and although he had a life insurance policy, the beneficiary was his brother, and she did not get a penny. Hearing this, Barr was relieved, undecided to use his connections to help Heather win the case. On the day of the trial, the prosecution brought in a well-known psychiatrist who vehemently denied the existence of pathological drunkenness. As of now, no CT scans or blood analyses have proven the existence of this disease, and it is just a concept concocted by some medical workers. His testimony propelled Heather directly to the forefront. If pathological drunkenness does not exist at all, then she can't get away with it on that ground. Heather's lawyer also researched the specialist in advance and asked him only one question: how many patients with pathological drunkenness he had evaluated. The expert was clearly reluctant to answer, but he did not dare to lie in court, so he awkwardly said in number 2. The lawyer did not follow up, but the meaning he was trying to convey was already very obvious. How convincing is the testimony of a specialist who has only evaluated 2 patients? Immediately afterward, Heather's lawyer brought in a psychiatrist. Unlike the previous specialist, this doctor has in-depth research in the field of pathological drunkenness. The prosecution's lawyer intended to use the same tactic by asking how many patients she had treated with the disease. During her research at Stanford University, the doctor said, she met with patients unpublished, the findings in professional
I
journals?
would say that's correct.
This answer is obviously more convincing.
Opportunity for redirect, Your Honor.
The prosecution's lawyer didn't give up and asked another question. Did any of the patients kill their spouses?
87 patients.
This is an obvious trap problem, and the absence of a kill does not prove that the condition is not serious. The defense lawyer presented the results of the doctor's research published that year. Among the patients, some cut their wrists in self-harm, some injured their own children, and some deliberately ran to the middle of the road and lost their legs.
Lovely spring night.
This is enough to prove that the extreme behavior caused by pathological drunkenness is not accidental. After 2 rounds of debate, Heather's side had a clear advantage. After unanimous deliberation, the jury decided that Heather was not legally liable for her actions as a result of her mental disorder. However, she still needs to be taken to the hospital for evaluation until it is determined that she is not dangerous. Even if all goes well, Heather will need to stay in the hospital for 6 to 8 weeks. In order to get Heather out of the place as soon as possible, Barr applied to join her treatment team. That night, Barr attended a lecture. Freud mentioned in The Interpretation of Dreams that when a woman craves lust, she tends to dream of herself. She was sorting out flowers, including lilies, carnations, and violet. Barr immediately sensed that something was wrong, and Diana had had a similar dream. However, how can a person who has lived in the shadow of being violated for a long time still crave lust? Barr couldn't help but think of someone. At the beginning of the court session the other day, the court guard said to Barr that he was surprised to see Heather. This made him wonder, could it be that the two had already known each other before? The host said that he was always impressed by beautiful women. Since last year, whenever Barr testifies in court as a psychiatrist, Heather has always sat in the back row and listened. Even if she wears sunglasses and a scarf, you can recognize her at a glance. Barr was confused. Diana lied about her illness, and Heather had been paying attention to herself since last year. So what was the sister's plan? Just when he was puzzled, a lawyer friend found a key clue. Heather's husband's insurance beneficiary was indeed his brother. But a month before the killing, her brother had died of bone cancer, so Heather was the sole beneficiary of the insurance. What's even more terrifying is that if her husband's death is determined to be an accident, Heather will receive double compensation, which is for $1 million. Barr didn't want to be taken advantage of, so he angrily went to Heather Fearing. In order to force her to tell the truth, he lied that Diana had confessed in full. Since last year, Heather has been paying attention to herself. No one but Diana knew about it, so there was no need for Heather to hide it anymore. Although Barr had found all the clues, he didn't panic because he still had a whole card in his hand. The police didn't find the murder weapon because Heather hid it. When the two of them went to the water tower together that day, they took a brass pipe, which was actually a dumbbell rod, with which Heather knocked her husband to death. Now the copper pipe is full of Barr's fingerprints. If she hands over the murder weapon, Barr will immediately be identified as the murderer. Heather's intentions are very obvious. As long as Barr helps her get rid of her crimes, everything will be fine. Barr never expected that his former sweetheart would be so vicious. After leaving the hospital, Barr meets the detective in charge of the case. The other party has identified Heather as the beneficiary of the insurance, but does not believe that she is the only murderer. On the night of the crime, the janitor saw Barr send Heather home. From the police's point of view, Barr is also suspected of committing the crime. What's more, Heather's lawyer is a good friend of Barr, and the doctor who testified in court is also close to Barr. How can there be a series of such coincidental things in this world? The inspector's words undoubtedly warned Barr that he had a good motive and that he would be held accountable if it could be proven that the murder weapon was related to him. The next day, Diana came to visit her sister. Ever since hearing Barr's words, Heather feared that her sister had betrayed her and began to test Diana on the side. But Diana didn't understand what she was talking about, which relented Heather. He told his sister where the dumbbells were stored and asked her to bring them when she needed them. If Barr can't be convinced, give the evidence to the police. However, as soon as Diana left the hospital, she came to Barr's clinic. After this period of contact, he had already developed a crush and drive Barr, but he did not say it because of his relationship with his sister. The screen cuts to the hospital. Barr approached Heather again and told her that the court had no release deadline for her, that he was a member of the committee, and that Heather could not be released as long as he did not agree. However, Barr intends to give her a chance. Tomorrow he will bring to district attorneys, and as soon as she explains the situation to them, he will try to get her out. Heather didn't know what Barr was playing, but she knew that the law followed the principle of node and item, and that no matter what she said, the decision would not change. At noon the next day, Heather explained the situation to the two prosecutors. She met Barr through her sister, and the two later developed an underground romantic relationship. Suffering from pathological drunkenness, Barr attempts to create a perfect martyr. On the night of the crime, Barr returned home with him, and then he killed her husband with a dumbbell. Soon after, my sister would come over with a murder weapon. Just take the fingerprint on it and you can verify that what I said is true or false. It turned out that Heather did not intend to plead guilty, nor did she intend to follow the statement in court, but wanted to put the blame on Barr. As long as he is removed from the assessment committee, he will be released. As soon as she finished speaking, Diana walked in with a box, but instead of dumbbells, she had some useless waste paper. Heather suddenly flew into a rage, thinking that her sister must have colluded with Barr to frame her. However, the two prosecutors did not listen to her explanation and came up and injected her with a sedative. It turned out that these two people were not prosecutors, but personnel of the appraisal committee and the insurance company. Judging from her performance just now, it seems that her condition has worsened again, and it seems that she needs to be treated here for a longer period of time. In addition, Heather's current words are very different from the statements made in court, and the insurance company will also need to reassess the compensation situation. Heather was right. Her case would not be tried a second time, but Barr stripped her of her insurance money and locked her up here forever. The next day, Diana dyed her blonde hair in imitation of her sister, and then asked Barr came out and told him that she had helped him out of trouble. Can they be together now? Barr directly rejected her request. He himself never thought about it and did not give her any hints. Southern Wants give her any hints. It was all Diana's wishful thinking. Or came to the appointment just to get the dumbbells back, which Diana didn't expect to be so ruthless.
What made you so sure?
Betrayed his sister for him, and in exchange for ruthless abandonment. Diana said that the dumbbell had been thrown into the sea and left without looking back. Barr had already guessed that Diana would not hand over the dumbbells. They'd try rid the dumbbells, so he found a friend to secretly follow her. Subsequently, Diana found her sister with a look of shame. If I had followed my sister's advice, I wouldn't have the embarrassing situation I have now. Heather didn't blame her, and now there was a chance to redeem it. That is to hand over the dumbbells to the police. The two sisters looked very similar, so Heather directly exchanged identities with her. He asked Diana to pretend to be in the hospital while he swaggered out in her clothes. He gets dumbbells from Diana's house and takes a bus to the police station, but is stopped by Barr's friend halfway through. He returned to his lodgings and called Barr to say that the things had arrived. As soon as he hung up, Heather chased after him. He shot and killed Barr's friend and then called the detective. He said he had something of interest to the police and asked the detective to meet him at Marina Bay. But what he didn't expect was that Barr's friend was not killed. When Barr arrived, he told him the important clue about Marina Bay. Barr quickly arrived at the scene and arrived at his destination before the two met. He took the dumbbell out of his bag and claimed that it was the murder weapon used by Heather to kill her husband. Now that the dumbbells have Barr's fingerprints on them, Heather's plan to plant them has failed. At this point, Heather was left with one last option. He pulled out his gun, forced the two to drive near the water tower, and threatened to kill everyone. The pistol has the fingerprints of the inspector and the dumbbells have Barr's fingerprints, which one would think were accidentally killed in a fight. The most important thing is that Heather is in the hospital at this time, and this matter has nothing to do with her. If this continues, the two of them will surely die. So the detective slammed on the accelerator and drove the car into the reef. And the people in the car immediately scattered and fell. When Heather came to her senses, she found that Barr was nowhere to be seen. She tracked him to the water tower. And Barr guessed what happened to her. It was Heather, not Diana, who was violated by her father as a child. One night, my father was in a coma because of alcoholism, and his body was covered in alcohol. This was Heather's only chance to escape her father's control, and she lit a match and burned him alive. What Barr wanted to say was that his father did deserve to die, and that her husband probably deserved it, and that none of this was Heather's fault. Seeing that Heather was about to be convinced, the inspectors suddenly caught up, and the shouting instantly brought her back to her senses. How could she be so easily influenced? Just as he was about to pull the trigger, the fence, which had been shaking, suddenly broke. Barr grabbed the fence with one hand and dragged Heather off the cliff with the other. Later, at the world's greatest magician's hat in wax, the inspector arrives and rescues Barr. This is the end of this well-planned murder. At the end of the film, Diana goes on a date at a restaurant with a wealthy man who uses Heather's name and claims that she can't drink. It seems that a new storm is about to be staged again. This is the end of the story. Final Analysis is a relatively unpopular movie, with only more than ratings on a certain platform. From a suspense point of view, the film does not have too many highlights. The whole story is bland and straightforward. There's only one murderer from beginning to end, and there are no twists and turns. However, from the point of view of exploring human nature, the film is a classic, telling the story of a femme fatale. In order to obtain her husband's insurance money, she did not hesitate to kill people to cheat the insurance, and the hero fought with her wits and courage, and finally won. However, of our praised magicians, all this is cosmetic. The most central character in the film is actually her sister Diana. She approaches Barr through a dream about arranging flowers, which the sisters have chosen together.
About my mother and father.
And after watching the film, you will find that your sister doesn't know anything about dreams, while Diana has studied the metaphors of dreams quite a bit. Like the 3 kinds of flowers, she said. In dream interpretation, the lily represents purity, the carnation represents carnal desire, and the violet represents the desire to be violated. This not only hints at her personality change, but also lays a hidden danger for her sister's plans. Barr is a psychiatrist, and sooner or later, she will understand the metaphor of dreams in order to treat Diana, and then she will find out that her sister's lying. So from the beginning, Diana did not want her sister's plan to succeed. So the question is, why did Diana rebel against her sister? In fact, it can be seen from the conversation between the two that Diana was afraid of Heather deep down, but had to obey her.
You look really nice.
It wasn't until her sister was imprisoned in the hospital that Diana's revolt began to manifest itself. For example, Heather wanted Barr to release her as soon as possible, and 2 months felt like too much time for her. And Diana said, "You did kill your husband.
So,
My sister is a murderer, and she should stay in the hospital," which also lays the groundwork for her later betrayal. In addition, Diana was a person with extremely low self-esteem. She described her sister as a butterfly and herself as a caterpillar. To please Barr, she also dyed her hair the same color as her sister. At the end of the film, she uses Heather's name, saying that she's an only child, and also follows her sister's habit of not drinking alcohol. From fearing her sister to rebelling against her sister and eventually replacing her sister, Diana's psychological changes reflect her low self-esteem and dinner twist. The film Final Analysis depicts the horror of desire through a crime story. Indulging in the aroma of duty almost made a big mistake. The elder sister kills for money and blames Barr, and the younger sister does not hesitate to betray her sister for love. Greedy desires will always force us to want everything, so much so that we end up doing many things that are quick to win. A really good life is not about having much, but about learning to control yourself and making the right choices at the right time. Well, that's all for today's story. If you like my commentary, please remember to like, favorite, and support me with one click. Your support is my biggest motivation.